finish this drink, but everybody else brought a glass up, so I felt obligated. He now owes me 20 bucks. So when I found out I had something like 7 to 10 minutes to tell a biography, I realized it had to be an utterly unremarkable life or a remarkably short one. And it turns out it's a remarkably short one. Years ago, I was trying to write a song. About little kids who were suffering, who were in pain. And I kept trying to overwrite it. I kept trying to tell people how lonely they were, how isolated they were. And it finally occurred to me that maybe I should just try to make a sound that might capture what it feels like to be utterly alone and afraid. And so I came up with this thing that went, wee, yeah, yeah, yo. Wee, yeah, yeah, yo. Now, statistics tell us the truth. Somewhere in this room, there's at least one person who was abused as a kid, and I don't mean the headline-grabbing sexual abuse. I mean the more mundane abuse, the abuse of getting the shit smacked out of you by your parents on a daily basis. That's a really horrifying abuse, and more horrifying than that statistic that says that somebody who survived that is in this room, and God bless you for surviving it, is the fact that during the recession it's gotten worse. Domestic abuse complaints to the police and convictions have gone through the roof, and the mix is much more weighted towards children than it is towards spouses. So my remarkably short biography. When I met him, he was a walking welt. He was a mass of bruises. He was a whole bunch of scar tissue. His otherwise beautiful and perfect face was just slightly askew where the orbital bone had been shattered and not healed right. His name was Scotty, and he was 5 years old. I met him in 1985. The County of Los Angeles had made the remarkable choice of deciding to let a 21-year-old drunk, that would be me, instead of doing jail time for a series of escalating run-ins with the police, all of which involved being drunk, and you knew it. It was unambiguous because the charges were things like drunk and disorderly, drunk, driving. There wasn't a whole lot of mystery going on. Not only did I not have to do jail time, they gave me community service, but then they also let me pick where I would do the community service from this long list. And I ended up at a satellite office of the LA County Home for Children, which was just a shelter for battered kids who'd been taken away from their parents. For the first 2 months that Scotty was there, we didn't actually know if he could talk because he never did. You could say something to him, you could ask him a question, and he would just look up at you with these big eyes like he was pleading for something and you had no idea what, but you desperately wanted to find out so you could give it to him. So one day I was in playing with the kids and telling them stories, and then they had to go outside to the playground to participate in some activity, and I was alone in the rec room, or so I thought. And the night before, the girl I had been dating showed a heretofore unforeseen self-preservation instinct and decided that maybe she should just get the fuck away from me, and she dumped me. And so being alone, I just put my head in my hands and I cried. And after a couple minutes of that, I felt a little hand on my wrist. And it was pulling my hand down, and I looked, and there was Scotty, and he said, "Why are you crying, Mr. Rik? Did somebody hit you?" And I was so shocked at hearing his voice and hearing words coming out of him that I didn't respond. And he said, "You know, sometimes they got to hit you so you'll learn." And he started to talk. And I sat there for 2 hours until my legs were numb. I was afraid to move. I was afraid he'd stop and never talk again. And he didn't let go of my hand the entire time. And the formidable personality that ran this place, a woman everyone referred to as Ms. Rose, came in, and she was so shocked that Scotty was talking, she just stood there for about an hour watching us. And over the next couple of months, he came out of his shell. Not only could he talk, he was downright eloquent. And he loved to talk. He loved the sound of his own voice. It got to the point where you couldn't shut this kid up. So the big event every year at this shelter was when Miss Rose and the staff would take all the kids to Disneyland. I wasn't supposed to be able to go. You had to be licensed 6 ways from Sunday to be able to escort these kids and supervise these kids on a trip to Disneyland, but one of the counselors got sick or something, couldn't make it. Miss Rose brought me in at the last minute. It was sort of a terrifying thing. I mean, I just had 4 little dudes I was responsible for, and they were all attached to you by strings that were tied around their waists and then tied to my belt loops. And before she turned me loose with these 4 kids, she said, whatever you do, you know how skittish these children are. Do not take them into the haunted house. And if you do, just go straight over to the log flume and drown yourself in the water at the bottom of it, because I will kill you if you do it. She left me on my own, and, you know, I had these 4 little kids, but they were tied to me, so I wasn't worried about it. Well, it turns out that the engine associated with 4 little kids, when you introduce the variable called Mickey Mouse, is way stronger than 2 little belt loops can handle. It was like, Mickey, poof, they were gone. So I eventually tracked their strings back down, and I linked them around my actual belt, and I spent the rest of the afternoon like this, as children would shoot off in different directions, and I looked like, you know, I was having some strange hula hoop flashback. During the course of this day, I learned why Disneyland is littered with boring-ass rides like the People Mover. It's because little kids run grown-ups into the ground, and they need someplace where they can sit down while providing the children with the illusion of movement. We rode the People Mover about 18 times. Now, I decided I was going to do a little something extra for the kids that I had, and I had some extra money in my pocket, and I'd said like 3 or 4 times, well, you guys just let me know when you want to go to Main Street and get some ice cream cones. And, you know, they didn't really seem at all excited, which was weird. I mean, I had little kids and ice cream cones. I just, in my 21-year-old mind, it was like, of course you're going to be excited. And about the 4th time I said it, Scotty, being the talkative one at this point, just looked at me and he said, well, Mr. Rik, what is that? And I said, what is what? And he said, what's an ice cream cone? I was like, you don't know what an ice cream cone is? And the other 3 little kids were all standing there going, I couldn't believe that there were little kids, 4 and 5 years old, who'd never, not only never had an ice cream cone, but didn't even know what it was. So we went down to Main Street, and I bought these 4 little dudes ice cream cones, and it was where the party was, right? I mean, we got 4 different flavors, and they're like eating each other's ice cream cones. It was the most unsanitary thing you'd ever seen, and they weren't really eating the ice cream so much as they were like painting their faces with it and just laughing and smiling. And having seen these kids as they came in scared and bruised and skittish, it was just this magical moment. And then I saw one of the little dudes kind of looking back behind me, and he had gone still, and he's looking at me, and he's saying, don't get mad. Don't get mad, Mr. Rik. Don't get mad. I was like, what are you talking about? And I looked behind me, and there's Scotty. And his ice cream had fallen off the cone and down his shirt, and it was melting on the ground. And he was completely frozen. Now, one of the rules that Miss Rose had for you if you were working with the kids, you never make a sharp movement, and you never make a loud sound. And I looked at Scotty, and I could tell he was scared, and I just wanted to get to him as quickly as I can, so I lunged towards him, and he jumped back like somebody had hit him with a cattle prod. And the other 3 little dudes, as scared as they were of the big human who they now were afraid was mad, ran in front of Scotty. And they were like, it's okay, Mr. Rik, it's okay. He knows he made a mistake. And Scotty's sitting there saying, don't be mad, Mr. Rik. I know I made a mistake. You ain't got to teach me. You ain't got to teach me. And I yelled, I'm not mad at you. And now all the kids are crying. And I'm down on my knees trying to get them to come back to me. And somebody sees a bunch of little kids looking at a white guy saying, don't hit him, don't hit him, don't hit him. And not surprisingly, they called security. These were Disney security cops. They are not like rent-a-cops at the mall. These guys are good, and they were there. The kids were unlatched from me. I am in handcuffs as Miss Rose comes running down the street trying to explain to them what happened. Took a couple of hours to get it straightened out and get me cut loose. The kids won't look at me. Scotty, he won't talk to me because now they're afraid that I'm mad that he got me in trouble. So Miss Rose decided that the best thing for the next week or two would be if I came in during the day when the kids are in classes and I helped them in the office, but I didn't have any interaction with the kids anymore. And sometime during that week, through a series of legal mishaps that I did not understand at the age of 21 and understand even less now, something that really was fairly common happened, and Scotty was sent back to his parents. He lasted 4 days. His father, who was a rather large man, was remarkably candid when explaining to the police what happened. It's like he was telling them what happened so they would surely understand why he did what he did, and they just let him go back to eating his dinner. Scotty had dropped a fork. You're not supposed to drop a fork. So his father, not really interrupting his rosemary chicken that he was gnashing on, hit him. And I don't mean he slapped him. He made a fist, and he plowed him right in the face. And as well as I knew that little kid, I know he tried. There is no doubt in my mind that he tried. He tried not to cry because you're not supposed to cry. And if you cry, you're bad. And if you're bad, you get taught. But he cried. So his father hit him again. And he cried more. And he hit him again. And he hit him again. And he hit him again. And he threw him across the room. And he kicked him while he was on the ground. And then his father changed up. He was still hitting and kicking him, but not because the kid was crying, but because the kid would no longer look at him when he was talking to him. And ever since hearing that, I have always hoped that he died somewhere in those first 2 or 3 minutes and was not a participant in the 2 or 3 minutes that followed, that God decided this was enough. At his funeral, it was the priest, Miss Rose, and me. His parents didn't make it out of the 1980s. They both died in prison. Miss Rose died 10, 12 years back. And it occurred to me as I was trying to figure out what biography would I tell, that maybe I should tell Scotty's, because there was a good chance that I was the only person who remembered him. And I try not to remember the horror of how he died, and I try not to remember the way he'd get so scared. I try to remember that little hand on my wrist, that little kid who held on to my hand for 2 hours, not because he was scared, but because he thought I was sad and needed some company. I try to remember the way he'd laugh. I try to remember those big old eyes. So I told this biography of a remarkably short life in hopes that not only will I go forward remembering a little boy named Scotty Williams, but maybe some of you would take that name along with you. Thank you.
Keep it going for Rik, everybody.